Now let's discuss that further with Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Let's talk about the failure of the international community to act effectively here. We are talking about horrific numbers here, 200 starvation-related deaths, including more than 100 children.
Well, this is really a total failure, isn't it, of the particularly Western leadership, but it's not just the West. People like China as well, they have failed really to intervene, and it's rather sad to hear UN agencies calling for urgent action to save lives, and yet the United Nations itself has really no ability to follow up on that with any action itself. So they're calling, it's like they have a megaphone, they're standing there in Geneva and New York, and they're just calling desperately, but nobody's listening because the leadership of this world are not doing enough. And I would call, I think, on every single nation that they should be doing something, however small, to contribute towards getting food into Gaza, particularly, and water. Let's not forget, by the way, that for at least 15 years, the Israelis have been destroying the indigenous water systems of Gaza, pumping sewage into areas where the Palestinians try and get their water from. So in other words, poisoning their water supplies. This is all premeditated genocide. It's literally a hatred for a different group of people who think in a different way. Actually, I don't even know if there's an ethnic element to this much, really. It's all to do with ideology and seeing people as other, particularly the Arabs. So, and with regard to getting food in, that is clearly an absolute priority. But why? I think everybody around the world is puzzled. We just heard from your correspondent there about chaos and nihilism. Those are correct words to use, absolutely correct, because these are elements of evil minds and evil mentality that we've seen many times, too many times. The British, when the British arrived in North America, doing exactly the same sort of evil acts against others, othering people. And everyone has to understand very clearly, looking at this from Netanyahu's point of view. And it might be that people want to say, well, we shouldn't really do that because the guy's a maniac. But if you do that, you will understand that if Netanyahu finishes this war, his coalition will collapse. All the far right political parties will pull out of the coalition. There will then have to be almost certainly a general election in Israel, and Netanyahu will likely go to prison. So this is why Netanyahu is continuing the war for his own political survival, and also, of course, he's being supported by the United States and Donald Trump. For the most recent revelation last week on going underground was from Ari Ben Menashe, who is suggesting that he's a former Mossad officer, suggesting the Mossad almost certainly have blackmailable dirt on Donald Trump. So if you want to ask why is Trump supporting this, that may well be why.
Exactly. Sir Gosling, you mentioned that even China, the second superpower in the world, failed to intervene, as well as the UN. What sort of intervention are we talking about here?
Look, it should be obvious to everybody. At the very least, Chinese should be using their seat on the United Nations Security Council to be pushing very forcefully, putting forward resolutions, very strong suggestions for action against Israel, action to protect, for example, no-fly zones, to have peacekeeping troops in Gaza specifically, but also, of course, the West Bank too, to protect Palestinians. I don't see any of this from the Chinese. There are obviously the Chinese have the ability, the military capability to get aircraft. Even the British have been doing this, amazingly. So why aren't the Chinese getting their transport aircraft, dropping food supplies and water into Gaza? Of course, this is something the Chinese military could very easily do. I suggest possibly even the Iranian military could be doing these things. But everybody seems to have abandoned these people in Gaza to their fate, which is a horrifying verdict on humanity. And if you really want to understand what's going on, I think many people do, have a close look at David Livingstone. He's a Muslim writer from Montreal in Canada, and he's written a very good book called Zionism, a history of a Jewish heresy, which explains why Zionism has really got nothing to do with the Old Testament Judaism, the Tanakh, as they call it. It's nothing to do with it. And he traces back many of the individuals around the German composer Richard Wagner in the 19th century to both the Zionist congresses, the first ones of those in the 19th century, and those people who would eventually form German nationalism and the Nazi Party a few years later, couple of decades later, in the 1920s. So this is an important thing to understand, that many of the roots of Nazism and Zionism are in the same German individuals.
That's right. Mr. Gosling, let's get back to the topic at hand. They say that the children in Gaza never get PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because there is never a post-moment for them. The trauma never ends. My question, what are the long-term social and psychological consequences, effects for the children of Gaza do you see if they survive this?
Well, it's the same for children in any war, actually. To see their friends killed, to see their family killed. It was the same in the Blitz in London in 1940. To possibly have your limbs destroyed. Obviously, this is not good for kids. And one of the most frightening things here is that the parents just don't have the ability to protect or feed their children. So this is, and we've even had reports of children begging to die because their loved ones have gone, why can I not die too? This is something that 5-year-old kids should not be put through. Of course they shouldn't. And so let's have some action from the international community. It's all very well to discuss all this. We can talk on here all night, but we need action, don't we? We need food in there. We need also protection for these people from the international community. And the Russians are a little bit tied up right now in Ukraine with some other things in other parts of the world. I'm always suggesting that great superpower China needs to step up to the plate and show that it's a real superpower and it's not afraid to take on some of the most evil people on planet Earth.
Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Thank